Hi, everyone, and welcome to applying for the 2021 Second Cycle Direct Effect and Priority Impact Quality of Life Grants Program webinar. This webinar will provide program guidelines for both the direct effect and priority impact grants and offer technical assistance guidance on accessing the online grant portal and submitting applications. A live question and answer period will also be offered. To view the closed captioning, please click the CC button located on the bottom of your Zoom screen. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available on the Reeve Foundation YouTube channel. I'm now going to hand it over to Alexandra Gleason, the Quality of Life Grants Program Associate. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Alexandra Gleason, the Grants Program Associate for the Quality of Life Grants Program at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And I would like to thank you and welcome you to the Reeve Foundation Quality of Life Applicant Technical Assistance webinar. Before we begin, I want to thank our colleague Kaylee, who is doing all of the technical behind the scenes stuff, and our Quality of Life Grants Program Director, Mark Bogosian, who will be responding to your questions that you post throughout. If he doesn't get to your question, we'll try to get at it during the Q&A period at the end of this presentation. So if you have a question, please type your questions into the Q&A box and not the chat box. If you do put anything in the chat box, we will also get to it, but it does make it easier to have everything all in one place. After the webinar, if you have a question, we also welcome you to submit questions about the application process to qol@christopherreeve.org. This email address will be visible on the next slide. All questions submitted through the Q&A, chat box, and by email will be collected, aggregated, and answered in an FAQ document that will be posted on our website. The deadline for emailed questions is Wednesday, September 22nd. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that these grants are for nonprofit organizations. So under our federal cooperative agreement, we are not able to provide grants to individuals. Nonprofit organizations can include nonprofit organizations with 501c3 status, municipal and state governments, school districts, colleges and universities, recognized tribal entities, and other institutions such as community or veterans hospitals. We have seen a lot of individual requests already in our question submissions, so please contact our information specialist team for individual assistance and resources. I will also provide information specialist team information in this presentation. Again, here is the quality of email address for our Quality of Life Grants Program. If you think of any questions after today's webinar, please email qol@christopherreeve.org. And here's the information for our information specialist team. Our information specialist team provides worldwide resources and assistance. You can either call, schedule a call, or submit a question using our website. You can find the site by typing the link written at the top of this slide. The 2021 Second Cycle Quality of Life Grant Program will offer direct effect and priority impact grants. The deadline for submissions is Thursday, October 14th. Grant projects awarded through the 2021 Second Cycle will start on January 1st, 2022. Just so you all know, the foundation is no longer able to provide individual pre-award assistance either by telephone or email. But again, please submit any questions about the application process to qol@christopherreeve.org. Now, what I really want to focus on in this webinar, as all of this information is provided in the program and application guidelines, are the funding restrictions, especially what is considered gifts to an individual, eligibility, and information on budget specifics. We've also added some scoring rubrics and a copy of the application review form that external reviewers use when reviewing and scoring your applications. This should allow you to better understand how your applications are evaluated, and you can find those in the guidelines and on our website. I can't encourage you all enough to take a look at these. Included in the guidelines now are also samples of the interim and final reports, as many of you have given feedback that said it would be helpful to see the reports so you know what will be expected if awarded. I also want to talk about how the grants are selected. There is a new page on our website that goes into detail about this, but I will go over it later in the presentation. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be discussing today. We'll start with some general information about the Reeve Foundation and all of our programs. We'll spend a good amount of time going over things like eligibility, our funding restrictions, and allowable expenses. I'll share a few examples of each grant opportunity and show you all how to access our online grants portal. Then we'll wrap up with going over our application and review process, and I'll explain how awards are made and what we expect of our grantees once awarded. I want to start with a brief history of the foundation. So the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's roots stretch back to 1982, when a New Jersey high school student named Henry Stifle was involved in a car accident that left him paralyzed at the age of 17. What started as the community-driven Stifle Paralysis Research Foundation soon became the American Paralysis Association, or APA. In 1995, when the actor Christopher Reeve was injured, the APA was one of the first places that he and his wife Dana turned to. By 1999, the APA became the Christopher Reeve Foundation, and Dana's name was added after her untimely passing in 2006. What's important to know is that we are paralysis focused and that grant funding must be targeted to projects that will serve individuals living with paralysis, their families, and caregivers. We also use a functional definition of paralysis, which is difficulty and/or inability to use your arms and/or legs due to neurological conditions, including, but not limited to, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, stroke, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, ALS, post-polio syndrome, and others. While we do consider supporting other programs that include people with other types of disabilities, as well as inclusive community projects, proposed projects must serve a majority of people living with paralysis and at least 3 individuals with paralysis or their family members or caregivers. The Christopher and Dana Reeve National Paralysis Resource Center has been federally funded since 2014 through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Community Living, otherwise known as ACL. The National PRC provides deeply needed information, program, and individualized support and assistance to the over 5.3 million Americans living with paralysis. The foundation of the National PRC are our information specialists who have provided one-on-one assistance to over 106,000 families in 170 languages. We also have a military and veterans program, which supports the unique needs of our servicemen and women, a peer and family support program with over 450 certified peer mentors who provide support to over 12,000 people, a virtual community of over 3 million users who visit our website and Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and other social media outlets. There's also Reeve Connect, which is a private forum for our community. And I definitely invite all of you to sign up and add your voice and share your expertise on Reeve Connect. Please go to our website at www.christopherreeve.org for more. The quality of life grants are also funded through our cooperative agreement with ACL. I just wanted to add also that we have funded over $34 million to over 3,400 programs since the program's inception in 1999. Lastly, the National PRC provides free health-related resources and materials. All of these resources are free, including our flagship publication, the Paralysis Resource Guide. We have wallet cards on sepsis, deep vein thrombosis, and other secondary conditions. There are many publications on bladder and bowel management, pressure injuries, and advocating for the rights of children living with paralysis. State fact sheets and many other resources are also available. We invite you to reach out to us at any time for any of these materials for your own organizations, as well as for those you serve. The Quality of Life Grants program impacts and empowers people living with paralysis, their families and caregivers by providing grants to nonprofit organizations whose projects and initiatives foster inclusion, involvement, and community engagement while promoting health and wellness for those affected by paralysis in all 50 states and U.S. territories. I want to reiterate again that under our federal cooperative agreement, we cannot make grants to individuals. We cannot provide funding to an organization that will get passed on to individuals. We'll also address this when we talk about gifts to individuals and what those look like. Before beginning your application, I recommend that you read the grant application and program guidelines, which provides information about the QOL grants program and funding tier descriptions, new eligibility criteria, funding restrictions, and allowable expenses, as well as application questions. The guidelines are available on our website. You can also visit the Reeve Foundation website for an overview of the QOL grant program and QOL grant application process. Please read all of the information contained in these documents and on the web pages to familiarize yourself with the application process to better prepare yourself for the required information requested in the applications. Also available on our website is the People First Language Guide, which is the guidelines for discussing people with disabilities, and a quick guide to establishing evaluation indicators. The grant application does require you to describe evaluation indicators that you will use to measure the success of the project. The indicators must be a combination of both input and output indicators and must be measurable. You'll also be asked to describe the evaluation methods you will use, which can include things like surveys, interviews, focus groups, review of program documents, and more. So here's the timeline for this funding cycle. We will be accepting questions via email until September 22nd. You can email all questions to qol@christopherreeve.org, and we will add them to our FAQ, which will be uploaded to our website. Proposals will be due on October 14th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. No exceptions will be made if you pass this deadline. We will review the applications with 2 separate review teams from October 18th until December 6th. Grants will then be awarded by the end of December, and the grant cycle will begin on January 1st, 2022. Okay, so let's move into eligibility requirements. Quality of life grant applications are accepted from 501c3 nonprofit organizations, municipal and state governments, school districts, colleges and universities, recognized tribal entities, and other institutions such as community or veterans hospitals. An organization must have its own 501c3 tax status or be a part of or a chapter of a national organization that is a 501c3. Fiscal sponsors cannot apply on behalf of non-501c3 nonprofit organizations, and 501c4 organizations that do not have 501c3 status are ineligible. Here's a new eligibility requirement that I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands. So previously, the waiting period for reapplying for funding after receiving Reeve Foundation grant was 1 year. With this new cooperative agreement, we are striving to create a level playing field and opportunities for organizations applying for funding. So starting with this cycle, we are instituting a new waiting period of 5 years within the same category. So any other category or tier will still be a 1 year waiting period from your previous grant closure. So for example, we have 5 years of funding available 5 tiers of funding available twice a year. If your organization were to receive a tier 2 assistive technology grant this fall, you would have to wait 1 year until after the close of your grant is complete and before you can apply for any other quality of life grant. Your organization will be ineligible for a second tier 2 assistive technology grant until after June 30th, 2026, but you would still be able to apply for any other category in the same tier or other tiers 1 year after the close of your grant. If you have any questions regarding our new Building Community Capacity Initiative, please email qol@christopherreeve.org with the subject line Eligibility Question. In accordance with our federal cooperative agreement, the Reeve Foundation is prohibited from funding the following: grants awarded directly to individuals. This also includes any expense that would be seen as a gift to an individual, such as a ready bag for disaster preparedness, t-shirts for a camp, jerseys and uniforms for a sports team, trophies, a home modification, or an individual vehicle modification. This also includes supplies and materials for virtual camps or workshops, such as crayons, art supplies, exercise bands, really anything that is given to someone that they can physically keep. Internet service can also be considered a gift, but we can talk about ways to potentially provide internet service through the loan of devices in a few slides. gift cards for participants, Amazon memberships for movie nights, book clubs, or other app subscriptions for individuals. The government would consider all of those gifts to individuals as well. To me, it's a very tricky area, especially during the pandemic, because if children went to an in-person event and there was construction paper, glue, scissors, etc. on site, and they made an art project, they would leave and get to go home with their finished products, let's say a paper airplane. That would not be considered a gift. But if they went home with the scissors, the bottle of glue, and all the leftover construction paper that it took to make that paper airplane, that's what would be considered a gift. In this COVID virtual world, that makes it a little bit hard because the children do need these supplies to complete the project. And the only way to get around sending supplies is to have them be considered as a loan. Now that is easier to do with things like, for example, iPads. An organization loans out 10 iPads to 10 children for a 12-week project. And at the end of the week, the 12 weeks, they're able to collect them. Then the organization has them for future offerings, and individuals do not get to keep or own the iPad. But when it comes down to supplies like art supplies, it's very difficult to navigate because you really can't loan paintbrushes or even books or glue or things like that. So for for-profit companies, this also includes nonprofit organizations acting as fiscal sponsors for for-profit companies or other organizations that do not have their own 501c3 tax status. And we're also unable to fund projects based outside of the United States or projects that use contractors or vendors outside of the United States. Again, if you have any questions about these, feel free to throw them in our Q&A box, or you can email qol@christopherreeve.org. Research is also something that we cannot fund, and rehabilitative therapy as well. However, programs that assist people living with paralysis to participate in exercise opportunities as opposed to rehabilitative therapies are allowable. So programs that use physical or occupational therapists to work directly with persons with paralysis is considered part of rehabilitative therapy. Exercise opportunities that are facilitated by someone who, for example, has a bachelor's degree in exercise science or is a certified fitness instructor, that would be an allowable expense. Equipment is allowable through funding loan closets. Otherwise, equipment is provided to individuals to keep is also considered a gift. Requests for loan closets must include a specified period of time. So a device loan is typically 4 to 6 weeks and can sometimes be up to 9 weeks to 3 months. And this really enables the individual to try out and familiarize themselves with assistive technology or durable medical equipment before acquiring it or not acquiring it on their own. Open-ended or long-term loan closets will not be considered, and this also applies to ramps as well. Earlier, I did mention internet service. There are a few ways that you can provide internet service through the loans. So if your organization were to request hotspot devices to loan on, short-term basis, or even tablets with internet service included, those would be ways that you could get around providing internet service. Equipment can be funded if it provides access and/or promotes independence. So for a couple of examples of each, for providing access, adaptive strollers that are used as a part of a program and not given to individuals, they would remain on site, which means they would be usable for the next family who comes through. A transfer chair at a community pool, a stair lift, an examination table, or a gynecological examination table in rural areas where no such equipment is available in that region. And for promoting independence, that would be things like a scale for knowing your weight that promotes independence. It allows people to remain healthy, as being overweight can really lead to a myriad of chronic health conditions. Other things are beach wheelchairs and adaptive bikes at community parks, or sports wheelchairs for a community sports team. And the last examples that I mentioned could also fit under the area of providing access as well as independence. Just want to touch on gym equipment. Gym equipment that is providing access is allowable. However, not gym equipment that you would have to use a physical therapist or medical type personnel guiding you through the process or use in therapy. So in open gyms where individuals can freely use equipment without the help of medical assistants or physical therapists, that is more than eligible. We cannot fund the development of prototypes for invention of equipment or other research or developmental activities involving intellectual property rights. We also cannot fund construction of buildings or major construction. However, funds may support simple accessibility modifications to existing structures, playgrounds, trails, and other things like that. Requested funds for simple accessibility modifications, for example, are allowable if they're for an already existing bathroom. Allowable expenses would include grab bars, accessible toilets and sinks, slight opening of the door, adding electronic door openers. We cannot fund the building of a new bathroom or the major renovation of the existing bathroom. But like I said, grab bars, sinks, accessible features like that are all eligible. If, for example, you're requesting funds for an accessible lift or elevator, this would be allowable under equipment that provides access and promotes independence. We cannot fund the excavation or construction of the elevator or shaft, as that would be considered major construction. Lifts and elevators are generally simple plug-in devices that help people get up a few stairs or from one floor to another. It's not a major modification, but construction of the elevator shaft itself would be considered major construction. Now, I want to talk a little bit about playground construction and make that really clear because we do get quite a few questions concerning this every year. So modifications or minor relocations of older non-accessible playgrounds or parks is allowable. We just can't fund any playgrounds that will be entirely new. So for example, we see many applications for fully accessible playgrounds in school districts or towns that currently have no inclusive and accessible options for kids and their families. If a school comes to us with a proposal and says they're completely renovating their non-accessible playground to make it fully accessible and inclusive, because they're replacing an older playground, we can fund things such as pour in place surfacing or accessible inclusive playground structures. If this school did not have a playground before and are installing a brand new playground for the first time on the property, we would not be able to fund that. Also, if minor relocations are happening within the same property, such as moving the playground to a more accessible location on the school grounds, that would be considered eligible as well. But any relocation must remain at the same property. Once it becomes a change of address, it is no longer a minor relocation. Just a few more restrictions we have for the program. Please make sure that your program will serve more than 3 individuals with paralysis, their families, and caregivers. If it is under 3, your proposal will not be funded. We also cannot fund fundraising events or paid fundraiser positions, as well as lobbying or efforts to influence legislation. We can fund things such as community awareness campaigns, but any effort to change legislation or influence lawmaking is strictly prohibited. If you're applying for any grant in tiers 1 or 2, please make sure that you'll be able to complete grant spending within the 12-month period. If you're applying for tiers 3 or 4, please make sure that the project timeline for your grant, please see that, make sure that you'd be able to fit it, complete spending within the related timeline. If the project or spending will take you longer than the cycle's established timeline, then your project will not be funded. I also want to stress the food bullet point. We cannot fund any meals, snacks, per diem, lunches, dinner, beverages, definitely no alcohol. And we do see this request the most. We cannot fund any type of water. Food and beverages of any kind is considered a gift. Now I bet you're sitting there wondering, what can they fund? If this is your first time applying for a quality of life grant, you'll be surprised at just how many different project categories we are able to fund each year. Funds can support a wide range of programmatic expenses for lots of programs and services, which we will cover in the direct effects descriptions and types of projects funded in the upcoming slides. Grant funds can support programmatic personnel, consultants and contracted workers, entry fees, transportation costs, facility rental, travel reimbursement, marketing, equipment, though please see the equipment funding restrictions I talked about a few minutes ago, supplies, and more. For travel, these are the same guidelines that we adhere to in our federal cooperative agreement. So we have airfare at $500, train at $275, hotel at $225 per night, and mileage is reimbursed at 56 cents per mile. If you're requesting funding for administrative or indirect costs, a de minimis indirect cost rate of no more than 10% is allowable. However, if your organization has a negotiated federal indirect cost rate agreement or NICRA, you may include indirect costs at the federally negotiated rate. Please note that a copy of your current NICRA will be required if your application is approved for funding. And just as a side note, programmatic expenses directly related to serving individuals with paralysis and their families are considered more favorable than operational expenses and or large capital projects. I'd like to touch a little bit on budget specificity, and vendor quotes. We want you to be as specific as possible in your funding request. So for example, if you're going to request funding for equipment for a loan closet, please be specific in the proposed budget, indicating the pieces and the number of pieces of equipment you're buying. So for example, if you're buying eye gaze devices, 4 eye gaze devices at $4,000 per device for a total of $16,000 would be requested. Or if you're applying for a part of program operation, for example, travel at 4 trips to the demo center, 532 miles at 56 cents per mile comes out to approximately $300. Please do not just request a blanket $25,000 budget equipment line with no detail. It will not be funded. We also ask, if you have them, to please include vendor quotes for the specific budget line items. Vendor quotes should be current, must be current at the time of application submission, and are strongly recommended for all equipment, services, and contractors. So if you're purchasing equipment or supplies from a website such as Amazon, you're obviously not working with a vendor who's going to provide you with a quote. We do also accept screenshots or price listings as well. They're all welcome. Now let's talk a little bit about direct effect, which is tier 1. So direct effect is open focused and will award at least 36 grants of up to $25,000 and will fund specific budget items that will clearly impact individuals living with paralysis, their families, and caregivers. Generally in this tier, we see about 400 applications and we're able to award about 50. These grants will have short to medium range impact. Long range impact and sustainability are not expected for grants funded at this level. Here's some of the funded projects. So you can see that we fund a very wide array of project categories. We have accessibility modifications, accessible playgrounds, assistive technology, advocacy, durable medical equipment, employment, fitness and wellness, peer mentoring and support. We also, we fund service animal programs, therapeutic horseback riding, transportation, and transition from institution to home. We also have some examples of projects that were funded previously. So we have some sports wheelchairs for a wheelchair basketball team, kayaks for rowing programs, hydraulic lifts at community pools, electronic door openers, programs for preventing abuse in adaptive sports. We also subsidize lessons for therapeutic horseback riding, and we fund support groups and other things as well. You can also see a full list of our previously funded projects and their descriptions on our website. So the priority impact grant tiers 2, 3, and 4, offer 3 increasing levels of grant funding. Priority impact grants fund priority issues for individuals living with paralysis. Grantee organizations should demonstrate the capacity to implement the grant without intensive technical assistance and capacity building, as well as demonstrate capacity for program development, evaluation, and sustainability. So tier 2 is comprised of 3 different priority impact areas. We have respite caregiving, assistive technology, and COVID-19 addressing social isolation. You can request up to $30,000 for any of these within this tier. So forms of respite supported through this program are emergency respite, home-based services, sitter companion services, consumer-directed respite, out-of-home respite, family care homes or host families, respite center-based care, adult day healthcare centers, and parent-family cooperatives. Grant funds cannot be used to support respite in the following environments: corporate foster home settings for children and teens, residential facilities, hospitality models, hospital-based, hospice, or in camps. Our assistive technology grants tier is open to all organizations with emphasis on increasing independence of people living with paralysis to assist them to participate fully in the communities of which they're a part and enhance their social, employment, education, or finance-related quality of life using assistive technology. And our COVID-19 Addressing Social Isolation grant was piloted in 2020 to specifically address the negative impacts of social isolation and loneliness resulting from the pandemic, thereby alleviating their physical, mental, and behavioral effects. Tier 3 currently offers nursing home transition only. However, we are very excited to offer 2 new grant programs next fall in 2022, which will target racial equity and rural, underserved, and underserved communities. The nursing home transition funds support centers for independent living and other organizations that provide transition or diversion services. And diversion, again, for those who may not be fully versed, is keeping people living with paralysis who are at risk from entering a nursing home from entering the nursing home. Tier 4 is specifically for employment grants. Employment grants are one of the Reeve Foundation's top priorities because employment is fundamental in achieving and maintaining independence, while also being one of the most challenging obstacles to individuals living with paralysis. So employment projects should assist individuals living with paralysis to enter, re-enter, remain and advance in the workplace. It should create pathways to meaningful living wage jobs or provide job development services to people living with paralysis, including education, adaptive technology, and career training with the goal of finding gainful employment. Please note that for our employment Tier 4 grants, grant funds cannot provide stipends and funds may not be given directly to workers or program participants as salaries or other incentives. So applying for our application, grant applications are completed online through a link to the Reeve Foundation online grants portal. You can find the link on our website and in the grant application and program guidelines. You may also, once these slides are posted, you can copy and paste the URL that's shown on the screen into your website browser. We also ask that you please add QOL@ChristopherReeve.org and administrator@grantinterface.com to your acceptable email address list to avoid having email communications from the Reeve Foundation blocked by spam blockers software. The administrator@grantinterface.com emails are those that will be directly coming from us to you from our system. We do write them and send them out, and some very important information is shared in those emails. So please make sure that that email is on your acceptable emails list. So after you click the link and get to our online grants portal, you'll be brought to the logon page. If this is your first time applying for a grant, you'll need to create a new account. So what you'll want to do is click on the Create New Account button, and you will be asked to input contact information for yourself and information about your organization to create an organizational profile. If you need any assistance, there is a link to a registration tutorial video on our portal page, or you can always email us here at QOL@ChristopherReeve.org. The next few weeks that I'm going to be replying to a lot of people who have issues accessing. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And if you have applied in the past, you'll need to enter your email address and password that you have previously created. If you forgot your password, you can click the Forgot Password link and an email will be sent to you to reset. If you do not remember or don't have access to the email account related to the organization, once again, you can contact QOL@ChristopherReeve.org. It's really important that you have an email address and password that's connected with the organization's account. If you do not, it's a very simple process for me to set you up with one. So please do not create a duplicate organization profile, as all organizational application history is connected to the grant profile. Also, please be sure to review your organization and contact profiles in the online system and update them with your most current information. Once you have created a new account or have logged onto the portal, you'll be brought to the Apply page. You'll be able to click the blue Apply button in the right upper hand corner of each grant description box. That's what those look like. And once you click on that blue apply button, you will be brought to the application. So to print out the application questions, you can click on the question list button in the upper right-hand corner. A Word document will be downloaded. These application questions are also available in the grant application and program guidelines. The list of application questions include paragraph count limits for text fields. Some applicants do find it helpful to create a draft application in Word, which can then be used to cut and paste your answers into text fields in the online application. The application is broken down into the following sections. So we start off with the application deadline, then we move into our eligibility and ask you to confirm a few questions. We have proposal description, budget information, organizational information, and supporting documentation. The following is an example of the types of questions that you'll be asked to answer. Note that you are given character limits on the open-ended questions, and 3,000 characters equals about a page of a Word document. So 10,000 word characters is about 3 pages. We do not require that you use all of the allotted characters, but the system will not allow you to go over that limit. We've also revised the project budget template. The new template is downloadable straight from the application. So please use that document. Any application using older versions of our budget templates may be eliminated. So starting at the top of the budget, you'll see that you need to fill in the organization and project name, as well as the total budget amount and amount requested from the Reeve Foundation. To fill out the template, what you'll do is type in the budget line item, then the total cost of the line item and the requested amount. All subtotals and total cost will formulate automatically. So please try not to alter any of the formulas that are already on the document. The budget is broken down into personnel costs, equipment, consultants and contractors, supplies, travel, and other costs. So you'll want to fill in the budget accordingly. If, again, you're requesting administrative or indirect costs, a de minimis indirect cost rate of no more than 10% is allowable. Again, if your organization has a NICRA, you may include indirect costs at the federally negotiated rate. And again, we will require a copy of your current NICRA if your application is approved for funding. When you're filling out the application budget, you can list the administrative indirect costs in the other costs category. Next on the budget, you will fill out the other sources of funding section and note if the funding is committed or pending. And then all subtotal costs for each budget area will formulate into the bottom section of the template. You won't have to do anything there. The total funds requested will mirror the line item budget that's above. So here is a sample budget for an organization requesting $24,750 with a total budget of $465,000. Now that we're not asking that you fit the entire project budget into the budget template, we're only concerned with what you're requesting from the Reeve Foundation. So you'll see that this person is listed for personnel, equipment, and other costs. They listed the total cost of each line item. So for the 33-foot sky run, the total cost is $5,000. You see they're only requesting $5,000 for that piece of equipment. So in this case, the total cost for the items and personnel that they're requesting from the Reeve Foundation equal $41,613, but they're only requesting the $24,750 in the rightmost column. Looking at their other sources of funding, we know that from the top of the proposed budget that the total budget for the entire project is $465,000. So we see that the organization has most of the project funding committed. So we know that if the project were to be awarded a Reeve Foundation grant, that this project is very likely to be implemented. Now, the lesson here is that reviewers do look at this and make decisions also based on the risk of a project not being implemented or being able to be carried out. So if the remainder of this project budget was pending and they didn't receive that funding, the $24,750 that the Reeve Foundation would award really wouldn't ensure that this project would be able to move forward. So it's likely that in this case, if the project, didn't have as much committed funding as it does, it likely would not be recommended for funding. We have also included a budget narrative requirement. So the budget narrative must include a description and justification of each budget category and line item presented in your proposed budget. For the budget narrative, please do not list anything that you're not requesting funding for. All expenses listed on the budget template should clearly match the items listed on this narrative. The budget narrative should also just really help us get a better understanding of what the grant funds are being used for. Sometimes in the project descriptions, what the funding would be used for can get a little bit lost in translation. So this narrative is really just a place for you to really detail and justify each budget line item. There is also a copy of this narrative downloadable straight from the application. So again, please use the provided template instead of creating your own narrative. At any time, if you want to stop and save the application, you can do so. So scroll down to the bottom of your application and hit the Save Application button. Once you've completed your application and responded to all of the questions, uploaded all of the required documents, or anything that you wanted to add in additional materials, you'll simply hit the Submit Application button. A submission confirmation page will appear. The system will also send you an email indicating that your application has been received. So again, please be sure that your email address has been entered correctly and that administrator@grantinterface.com is added to your contacts, because the email will come from that account. If at any time you accidentally press submit and you didn't mean to, please feel free to email me at qol@christopherreeve.org. I can very simply revert your application back to draft with no problem. The quality of life review process. So it's a rather lengthy, but here's a rough outline of what each cycle review process looks like. Sorry about that. The foundation relies on a group of external reviewers that are experts in the field of paralysis. So they are both people living with paralysis as well as those not living with paralysis. Current and past reviewers include doctors in both medical and mental behavioral health, lawyers, advocates, experts in assistive technology and other related fields, caregivers, and other stakeholders vested in improving the lives of people living with paralysis. The aim of the external review is to obtain peer and expert feedback on proposed applications. So the role of the external reviewer is to bring an informed, objective, and unbiased perspective to the assessment of the application. External reviewers read, evaluate, and rate the applications. They identify strengths and weaknesses. They provide comprehensive feedback on various aspects of the proposed application, such as project design. Does the application demonstrate that the proposed project design can be successfully implemented? Project reach. Does the application demonstrate that the proposed project will reach people living with paralysis, their families, and caregivers? Project evaluation. Does the proposal demonstrate the applicant's capacity to identify and measure quantitative and qualitative outputs and outcomes to evaluate the impact of the proposed project? Organizational capacity. Does the applicant organization have the capacity to carry out the project as proposed? Reviewers are provided with evaluation criteria, including information about the QOL grants program, funding restrictions, and allowable expenses, as well as an evaluation form containing a list of questions to be addressed and scored, and a scoring rubric. The external reviewers score and comment on the applications, and the scores are compiled. They also recommend whether or not to fund the application, and each application is reviewed by 2 external reviewers. Those applications that have received high scores, generally about 80% and above, are sent to an internal review committee. I do have to say, though, that number it changes every cycle. We do take the median score of what we receive back from the external reviewers. The internal review committee consists of foundation board members and staff that are not associated with the Quality of Life Grants program. They review the applications, score, and rank them as well. Then they are all discussed and evaluated at an internal review committee meeting, and the committee chooses the grants based upon ranking and evaluation. So there are a lot of moving parts to our review process, but it's very thorough. If anybody has any more questions about how we review our applications, again, please feel free to email us at qol@christopherreeve.org. All applicants will be notified by email if their application has been approved or declined. If your project is awarded, you will be asked to indicate your acceptance of the grant. In past years, we have required an email response, but we are changing things a little bit this year. And in an effort to eliminate mailing errors that we've seen in the past, we are asking that our selected grantees fill out a very short form on the online grants portal to indicate their acceptance. This form includes just confirming their intent to accept, as well as providing contact and mailing information for the grant agreement and grant payment. Once awarded, the applicants will receive a congratulatory email with a link to the online grants portal where they'll be able to fill out the intent to accept form. Please note that with this form, we will not begin processing grant agreements or payments until the form has been received. So if your organization is awarded a grant, please try to submit your intent to accept form as soon as possible, just so we can get the ball rolling, make sure that we can get your grant funding to you as soon as possible. Once the intent to accept form has been received, I will send a grant agreement to be signed. Once we have received the signed agreement, grant checks will be issued within 1 to 2 weeks. We will also provide you with a press release template to help publicize the grant award. And we do also regularly feature our grantees on social media, on the website, and in our newsletters and other publications. So we may call on you to provide stories and photographs that we can share with our community. There are some mandatory requirements that must be met to be in compliance with the QOL grant program. So we do require some reporting. Grant recipients must submit progress reports to the Reeve Foundation. An interim report will let us know that the project is proceeding as planned or not. And if not, what we may be able to do to help get it back on track. The final report will also be due 1 month after the close of the grant period and will detail the project's progress, challenges, how those challenges were addressed, the project's impact, and final grant expenditures. For our tiers 3 and 4, or no, just 4, my apologies. For tier 4, we will have a couple of intermediate check-ins. They will just be asking, how the program is going, making sure that everything's staying on track within outside of the interim and final reports, just because that is a 24-month grant. We will also ask to do site visits from time to time. So site visits to quality of life grantees by members of Reeve Foundation staff, board of directors, and or volunteers are arranged whenever possible to learn about your program, assess progress, assist with challenges, and participate in press-related activities. And as part of the final report at the conclusion of your grant period, grantees will be required to complete a short evaluation survey conducted by Vanderbilt University to enable you to offer candid feedback about the overall grant experience. And I do have to say that really helps us. I love seeing all of the feedback that we get from our grantees, and it really does help us to improve ourselves for the future. And failure to meet any of the report requirements may result in your organization being asked to return the grant funds, and your organization will be put on a list for non-compliance, and your organization will not be considered for future funding. To successfully close out the grant award, grantees must have timely submitted a final report indicating program accomplishments and outcomes, as well as a financial report indicating fully expended grant funds as related to their awarded grant budget. After receipt and review of these reports, barring any additional information requested, the foundation will send notification of grant closures. And if for any reason, grant termination, the foundation does reserve the right to terminate a grant if the project or program is no longer within Reeve Foundation funding parameters, or for failure to comply with the terms and conditions of the award as stipulated in the grant award letter. If the grant is terminated, the grantee must provide the Reeve Foundation with a complete and detailed reporting of funds that have already been expended. The grantee must also return all unused funds. Failure to comply with those provisions may result in your organization being reported to the Internal Revenue Service, the Office of Inspector General, and the Administration for Community Living. And terminated organizations will also be barred from receiving future Reeve Foundation funds for 7 years. just a note about feedback. In adherence with our federal cooperative agreement, we are unable to comment on denied applications or provide programmatic direction to organizations applying for quality of life grants, as giving feedback or direction would be providing unfair advantage over other applicants. We're happy to answer any technical assistance questions you have, but again, please, we can't answer any questions on why your previous applications were denied or provide any assistance on how you should take the direction of your next application. So thank you all for your interest in our grants program. We are all really looking forward to receiving your submissions this cycle. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to direct to qol@christopherreeve.org. But I do believe, I don't know the time, but I do believe we have a little bit of time for questions now. So I will try to address some. I know that our director, Mark, has been trying to get to as many as he could during the session. Just pulling up the question box here now. And I understand that the time slot was allotted for an hour and a half, but we do try to stay conscious of all of your time. And we understand that an hour and a half is a really big time commitment. So we will try to keep this to about an hour, just so you can all have a little bit of extra time with your days. Let's take the answer. So this question says, the idea of a loan closet is new. Do you have any information available regarding some model loan closets that you do support? Yes, so we fund many, many loan closets. On our website is actually a listing of all of our previous grants going back to, I want to say, at least 2017, maybe 2016. And in all of the direct effect categories would be examples of loan closets. So you're welcome to go through all of our documents on there. There's plenty of different, examples of different loan closets, but loan closets can be a lot of different things. They can be for durable medical equipment. They can be for assistive technology. The idea behind a loan closet is that by providing any type of equipment or, anything like that for a shortened period of time, in between 1 and 3 months, really allows an individual to get to know that piece of equipment, really test it out and see if that's something that is useful for their lives. We know that a lot of equipment is very expensive and a lot of it is unfortunately not covered by insurance. And this loan closet allows people the opportunity to test things and make sure that this is a purchase that they want to make before potentially spending thousands of dollars on something that they may not use. I hope that answers your question. I received my report after successfully completing a Tier 2 project, no additional questions. I am now able to apply for the cycle. Which tier do I qualify for? So if you are eligible, if your organization received a past grant and you received grant closure notification with a date stating that you would be eligible starting then, if you have surpassed that date, you are now eligible for any tier. So we're currently offering either direct effect or tiers 2, 3, and 4. You'd be able to select from any of the project categories within any of those tiers. I'm reading this question. We have homes for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our residents have mobility issues due to their disabilities. We are looking for grants to modify all bathtubs into walk-in showers to make it safer for the residents. Is this something that you all would fund with a grant? So as long as those showers are fully ADA roll-in accessible, and they are going to be used by individuals who are living with paralysis or paralysis causing conditions, those would definitely be eligible for funding. If they're walk-in showers and not necessarily roll-in, that would not be eligible, because again, the entire idea behind the Quality of Life Grants program is to serve people living with paralysis. We would need to make sure that the showers would be usable by people in wheelchairs. So are letters of support required? No, we do not require letters of support. You're welcome to add them into the additional materials section if you want to, but they are by no means required. Some of these questions, it's difficult because I'm going to have to address some of these questions and get more information from the individuals who are submitting. So if I don't get to your question, please don't be offended. Don't be upset. We will either respond to you individually to get more information, or we will be able to answer it in the FAQ afterwards. If we apply for a direct effect tier 1 grant in the category of fitness and wellness, and we don't have anyone on staff with an exercise degree, will that count against us? Not necessarily. It really depends on the type of fitness and wellness program that you're offering. So, if you're offering classes that are being taught by, different instructors, such as adaptive yoga or dance or anything like that, if they're experts in their field, even if they don't have the exercise science degree, that's totally acceptable. The only thing that you would have to be careful of is making sure that nobody is working one-on-one who would have a physical or occupational therapy degree. That's really when it would become a rehabilitative therapy issue. Tier 2, for the person who asked, the amount for funding for tier 2 is $30,000. And to clarify the difference between direct effect and quality of life grants. So quality of life grants is our umbrella name for the entire program. We are the Quality of Life Grants program. Within the Quality of Life Grants program, we offer 5 different tiers, and direct effect is the first tier in our program. So with that tier, that's the definitely most open-ended. That's the one that you can request up to $25,000 in funding, but QOL is really just the umbrella name for the entire grants program. As long as the grant supports a majority of individuals with paralysis, can the grant also include other people with disabilities? Example, people with paralysis as a result of TBI and people with TBI with no paralysis. Yes, so as long as the grant supports a majority of individuals with paralysis, we can also fund cross-disability grants. So a mixture of individuals living with paralysis as a result of TBI and those living with TBI and no paralysis would both would be eligible. Would large investments for a loan closet or refurbishment program like a hub scrub be eligible? And if so, under which category? I unfortunately am unfamiliar with the hub scrub term. However, we can fund up to $25,000 for a loan closet program. So if some of the funding in the loan closet request is for the refurbishment of equipment, after it gets turned in, obviously maintenance is going to need to be performed on most equipment. So if you're requesting funding for loan equipment and maintenance or refurbishment of that equipment, those would be eligible. But if you would like to email us at qol@christopherreeve.org and let me know what hub scrub is, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Mark, our Director Mark, I don't know if you know the answer to this question. How many Tier 2 grants do we expect to award this cycle? I know that for our direct effect, we are able to award about 36 of 25,000, but we generally award somewhere around 50. I'm not sure if he would have a better number for that one. I see typing. Will you fund the same project by an organization twice? So we would not like to fund the exact same project by an organization twice. For example, if your organization comes to us and requests, a certain piece of equipment for an open gym, if you come back to us for funding in the future, we would prefer that you come back for either classes or other pieces of equipment or accessibility modifications. We would really prefer not to fund the exact same thing twice. But if it's the same program, it's difficult for example, wheelchair dance organizations. You come to us for the same thing every year. We understand you're really only doing one thing, which is providing wheelchair dance. So in cases like that, it is allowable. Can we combine assistive tech and COVID social isolation as two purposes of a project under Tier 2? So you wouldn't be able to combine them per se. However, if you're addressing both of them, you can definitely mention that in your application, because assistive technology definitely has the need for assistive technology has definitely increased in this, COVID social isolation world. So if you're able to connect the dots, then definitely feel free to do so in the application. Oh, Hub Scrub is like a washing machine for wheelchairs and other DME. That's very interesting. What about funding similar equipment, but at two very different geographic locations with a different set of clients? Are you talking about for funding similar equipment at two very different So if your organization has multiple geographic locations and would like to, or chapters, and would like to spread out the equipment throughout multiple locations in your grant proposal, you can definitely do that as long as they all are operating under your organization. If they were to be another small organization or something like that, it wouldn't be eligible. But if they're chapters of your organization, that would certainly be eligible. Would we consider a project addressing social isolation of caregivers? I would say yes. I would say I'm not sure if we've seen a proposal for that yet, but I don't think that wouldn't be funded. I definitely would be interested to read a proposal that would address social isolation of caregivers. We can definitely, yep. Okay. So relating back to the multiple geographic locations, yeah, we could definitely fund two lift systems for two different therapeutic riding locations. How many Tier 2 applications do we typically receive? So this time around will be a little bit of a question mark, just because we are including two new project types in our Tier 2. So assistive technology was not a part of priority impact before this year, and neither was COVID-19. So it'll be very interesting. I want to say that in years past, we maybe receive 15 to 20 applications in that tier. However, with the need that we're seeing for assistive technology and COVID-19, addressing social isolation, we could definitely see a higher number this cycle. How would you show expenses in a nursing home transition budget when you don't know which people you will be helping? We would respond to needs to keep them in a community setting, but don't necessarily know the needs until we do a full assessment. That's completely fair. So in that case, you can request funding for personnel for nursing home transition, if you want to request funding for things that may be needed to complete the nursing home transition or diversion, what we've seen is, I believe, people generally will give a general amount, but provide vendor quotes of, we're thinking we'll need 2 new washer dryer units for this grant cycle. They each cost approximately $7,000. So we're going to request $14,000. And if they end up not needing 2 washer dryer units, we can always authorize a a budget change that would allow them to redirect the unused funding to another piece of equipment or something similar that would help assist in transitioning. I'm looking for any more questions that don't really require further information. I'll open it up to my counterpart. Mark, do you have any other questions that I haven't addressed that you'd like to answer here? There are a couple that I haven't been able to get to just because I do want to request a little bit of information from them. Okay.
I'm good too. The ones that I'm unable to answer, we just need a little more information too.
Okay, I do have one more to clarify how often the grants can be received. I understand that the new 5-year eligibility rule might have thrown a couple people for a loop. So when you receive a grant, say tier 2, you receive a tier 2 assistive technology grant. That grant will last 1 year. So the grant will close December 31st of 2022, and your final report will be due by January 31st of 2023. After you've submitted your report, and you will receive an email stating that we reviewed your report, we do not have any further questions, and we will provide you with a new eligibility date. So if you submit your final report on time, you will receive an eligibility date of January of 2024, because that is 1 year from January 2023. So at January 2024, you would then be able to apply for any grant except for the assistive technology tier 2, because that had been what you were just awarded. So any other grant in any other tier, if you want to apply for facility accessibility modifications, if you want to apply for an employment program, if you want to apply for anything else, you can, after 1 year of your grant being closed. You would just need to wait until 2026 to apply for another tier 2 assistive technology. So even tier 2 COVID-19 would be allowable after 1 year. It would really just be the tier 2 assistive technology that would be off limits until 2026. I hope that made things a little bit more clear. But again, if I'm not explaining or you just need a little bit more, please feel free to email me, qol@christopherreeve.org, and we can either set up a call and talk about it, or I can try to get back to you via email. Okay, and like I said, there are a couple more that we will reach out to separately just to make sure that we're understanding the question properly. But other than that, I don't believe we've gotten any additional new questions in a minute or two. So with that, I would like to thank you all so much for joining us today and spending the time with me. I really hope that this webinar was useful for you all, and that I've been able to provide some clarity for our application. We all really look forward to receiving your submissions for this cycle. And again, please feel free to email me anytime, qol@christopherreeve.org. All right. Thank you, everyone. I don't know how to turn this off, but have a wonderful day, everybody.